They told me I'd lose everything for what I was about to do. Looking back, no warning in the world could have prepared me for just how much my choice would cost and what it would give back. The hum of the engine filled the cockpit as I gripped the radio, eyes darting between the clouds and the blinking lights of my control panel. Tower, this is Meridian Flight 302. I have an onboard medical emergency requesting immediate clearance to land at Armstrong Military Base. The response that cracked over the radio was clipped and cold. Negative. Flight 302. Armstrong is restricted airspace. Continue to Salt Lake City as previously scheduled. My hands tightened on the yoke. 7 minutes away stood a runway with a world-class medical unit. In the cabin behind me, a middle-aged man was dying, his breaths shallow, his face ashen. He was passenger 8B, traveling under the name Richard Adams. That name meant little to me until today. My flight attendant, Anne, was kneeling in the aisle, pressing hard and fast on Adams's chest. She was barely holding it together, her knuckles white, determination etched onto her face. Every set of eyes on that plane, from anxious businessmen in suits to crying children, was fixed on her and the life slipping away beneath her hands. But what none of us knew then was just 30 minutes earlier, Adams had quietly pulled Anne aside near the rear galley, his voice low but urgent. "If anything happens to me on this flight, please call this number before dialing 911, he said, slipping her a nondescript index card with a phone number written in neat block letters. Anne's eyes had lingered on his face, searching for any sign this was just nerves. "Sir, are you ill?" He nodded, his lips pulled tight. "Yes, chest pains, but I must arrive in Salt Lake on time. Too many are counting on it." Back in the present, Anne's hands moved in trained rhythm, CPR refusing to let go of hope. She met my gaze as I turned to look through the open cockpit door. I could see the desperation in her eyes, the silent plea that echoed what I already knew. 40 minutes to Salt Lake would be too long. This man would not survive. Time was running out. I made my choice. I leaned into the radio, my voice hard with resolve. "Tower, this is Meridian 302. I'm declaring a medical emergency. We are diverting to Armstrong Military Base for immediate landing. Lives over licenses." A sharp, sterile voice snapped back, "Deviation from your flight plan will trigger investigation and revocation of pilot credentials. You are ordered to remain on course." My co-pilot, Ben Parker, was at my side, wide-eyed and silent. We'd flown together for years, but I'd never so much as bent the rule book, much less ripped out its pages and set them on fire. "Eli, if we do this, it's your job, your career. Everything." Ben's voice was almost a whisper. I breathed in, memory flashing of the faces of the people who trusted me, not just with their lives, but with their loved ones' tomorrows. I've flown a quarter century and never lost anyone under my care. I'm not about to start now. 7 minutes. The difference between a chance and a funeral. As we banked toward Armstrong, Anne did something she would later call the single most important act of her life. She dug the card from her pocket and dialed its number on the crew's secure line. The man on the other end answered after just one ring. "Agent Monroe." "Sir, this is Anne Wilder, flight attendant for Meridian 302. The passenger, Richard Adams, he's in cardiac arrest. We're making an emergency landing at Armstrong per the captain's orders." A chilling pause. "We'll have a team ready. Do not allow anyone to use this line. Secure all communication until further notice," came the final command. Outside, I could see the green fields of Armstrong flashing beneath us, the airstrip growing larger with every second. Inside, time was a thread stretched to its breaking point. I'd just bet everything, my reputation, my income, my future, on a man I'd never met, whose final act of quiet desperation was to trust a stranger with his secret. What none of us, not Anne, not Ben, not even myself, could know was that, at that very instant, encrypted calls were flying from Armstrong across the highest corridors of government. The man fighting for his life behind my cockpit wasn't Richard Adams, and his existence was more important than I could possibly imagine. Would we make it in time? Would this unauthorized landing cost me everything and save a stranger I'd just risked it all for? For this moment, there was no turning back. We touched down on the tarmac in a landing so smooth it felt surreal, ironic, considering it wasn't supposed to happen at all. As I steered the 737 to a halt at Armstrong Military Base, I caught sight of a half-dozen ambulances and military personnel massed on the runway, lights flashing under the grey morning sky. But standing out even more, a cluster of men in dark suits, faces grim and unreadable. It was clear this was no ordinary emergency response. The hatch opened, and the noise outside flooded in. Anne hustled the medical team on board, guiding them to 8B. As they loaded the unconscious Richard Adams onto a stretcher, I noticed two of the men in suits exchanged a quick, meaningful glance before turning back to us. The air around us crackled with tension, as if the whole base were holding its breath. Not 2 minutes later, I was approached by a senior military officer, his uniform crisp and his stare unblinking. "Captain Evans," he said, using my full name with the cold precision only found in the military. "You need to come with me. You are now part of a classified situation." I wasn't sure what he meant. I'd risked my license for a medical emergency, nothing more. But as I followed him into a sterile, windowless briefing room, it became clear that everything that was happening was far from normal. The door closed behind us with a soft thud. 3 people, 2 men, 1 woman, all of whom presented government badges without names, sat waiting with questions firing off in rapid succession. "How long have you known the passenger in 8B? Did he say anything to you before the incident? Did you notice anyone else on board behaving unusually?" I answered again and again. "He was just a name on the manifest." He said nothing to me. Everything seemed normal until he collapsed. After what felt like hours, the woman finally leaned forward, voice steady but weighted. "Captain, the man you transported is not who you think he is. Richard Adams is the cover identity for someone whose real name is classified at the very highest level. Your actions in bringing this jet to Armstrong may have saved a life, but they've also sparked a security crisis that cannot be overstated." Her words sank in, cold and heavy. "Can you at least tell me if he'll survive?" I asked. "That's not something we can share at this time," came the reply, which did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. While the brief interrogation continued upstairs in Armstrong's hospital, Adams was rushed into surgery. His true status, Naval Admiral and trusted national security advisor, just back from a whirlwind diplomatic mission, meant not just doctors, but also armed agents and command staff at his bedside. Meanwhile, back in my world, protocol had already begun to unwind my life. Not even 6 hours had passed before I found myself in a plain conference room across from a Federal Aviation Authority representative, a thick folder open on the table between us. He didn't bother to hide his contempt. "Captain Evans, you intentionally disregarded air traffic control, landing at a restricted installation. That's a gross violation of both aviation and federal law." I tried to speak. He was dying. "I had to make a judgment call." "You made an illegal call," he interrupted. "Do you have any idea what you put at risk? Do you know that, as soon as you entered restricted airspace, we had F-18s ready to intercept?" The air left my lungs. I'd known the consequences might be severe, but fighter jets, intercepting a passenger plane? My head spun at just how close things had come to total disaster. The FAA investigator's verdict was as swift as it was brutal. "Your license is suspended, effective immediately. Any chance for appeal will be months away at best. Your employer is also terminating your contract today per company policy." I sat in numb silence, the reality of it all crashing in like a rogue wave. My career, my family's only income, our son's college tuition, our mortgage, all on the line because, for 7 minutes, I'd chosen to put a stranger's life above the rules I'd sworn to uphold. When I finally made it home, every step from the driveway to the front door felt heavier than the last. Claire, my wife of 18 years, was waiting just inside, her face pale, eyes full of questions and fear. As we held each other in the entryway, the only words I could muster were, "He was dying, Claire." I did what I thought was right. But for the first time in my flying career, I wasn't sure if right was enough. That night, as rain streaked the windows and thunder rumbled low on the horizon, the weight of my choice pressed down on all of us. Claire and I sat at the kitchen table in silence. Our oldest, Emma, crept down the stairs just after midnight, her face drawn tight with worry. I broke the news as simply as I could: the flight, the passenger, our uncertain future. Emma listened quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. She'd just finished her second year at the university, dreaming of a teaching career. After a long pause, she reached across the table to take my hand. "Dad, we'll get through this. I can help. I can get a job, take a break from classes if I have to." My son, Tyler, emerged from his room soon after, still in his hoodie and jeans, clutching a textbook. A freshman in engineering, he'd always believed nothing could shake our little family. He sat down beside me, trying to be brave, and offered, "Maybe community college is enough for a while." "Don't worry about us, Dad." I wanted to comfort my kids, to promise them none of this would last long. But the truth was, I had no idea what came next. The only thing I knew for certain was that my split-second decision had put all our tomorrows in jeopardy. Claire tried to stay positive, making coffee before dawn, but I heard her muffled sobs in the bathroom that morning. I knew she was doing the math: bills, tuition, groceries, credit cards. How long could we make it with everything in limbo? I replayed my choice over and over, torn between pride and fear, hope and growing regret. The news broke before sunrise. By 8, our quiet subdivision was crawling with news vans. Journalists banged on our front door and called our home phone relentlessly. Headlines blared: "Local pilot suspended after secret base landing. Courage or recklessness. Meridian captain ignites aviation uproar." Every outlet wanted a piece of the story. Some called me a hero, others accused me of playing loose with national security. The harshest came from an aviation pundit who sneered on live TV. "We don't need daredevil pilots endangering the country for one passenger." I couldn't even watch the broadcasts. The sting was too much. Worse still was the call I received from Meridian's HR office: immediate termination, no severance. I was no longer welcome in the only world I'd ever known. Emma and Tyler did their best to put on brave faces, but the strain wore all of us down. Emma announced she'd found a temporary job at a nearby daycare. "I want to help, Dad," she insisted, hugging me hard as if her arms could hold back the storm. Tyler, ever the inventive one, showed me college forms for a local technical school. "You always said do what's right, Dad. We'll figure it out." But that evening, a question slipped from Tyler's lips, a question that haunted me in the quiet hours. What if the man you helped doesn't even survive? What if all this was for nothing? I found no answer to give him. Military officials had stopped all contact after my debriefing at Armstrong. I didn't even know if the passenger I'd risked it all for was still alive, much less if my gamble had been worth it. Then, as dawn broke the following day, a knock sounded at our front door. Slow, deliberate, impossible to mistake. Claire tensed up beside me. Peeking through the curtains, I saw not reporters but a convoy of dark SUVs glinting in the early sunlight, flanked by local police cars. My breath caught. "Claire, stay here," I told her, heart pounding in my chest. When I opened the door, a tall woman in a sharply cut dark suit flashed an ID at me. "Captain Evans, I'm Agent Charlotte Monroe, Secret Service. We need to speak with you regarding your actions 2 days ago," she said, in a voice that commanded instant attention. Claire stepped up behind me. "Is he in trouble?" "No, ma'am," Agent Monroe assured her. "This is a matter of national security." Please, Captain, come with us. The scene was surreal. My neighbors watching through parted curtains, my children peeking anxiously from behind the stairs as I was politely but firmly shepherded into the waiting motorcade. No one would tell me why I was being taken, or even where we were going, as the SUVs left our neighborhood in a cloud of questions. We sped through the city in silence, lights flashing at every intersection they cleared for us. My mind spun faster than the wheels beneath me. Was this the next step in my punishment, or something else entirely? Finally, Agent Monroe broke the silence as we approached the old municipal airport, now upgraded with new hangars, surrounded by men in black and military vehicles. Captain Evans, what I'm about to share is classified. Your passenger wasn't just any traveler. Richard Adams is in fact Admiral Jacob Dalton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, a key figure in a high-stakes diplomatic mission. Your actions likely saved not just his life, but enormous diplomatic consequences. It felt as if I'd been slammed with cold water. Admiral Dalton, the highest-ranking military officer in the nation. My mind whirled. Had I really changed the course of history by putting one man ahead of a regulation? But then the convoy came to a slow stop, and in the distance, a gleaming white and blue jet touched down on the tarmac. Its call sign, well, that was unmistakable. Air Force One. The enormity of what was unfolding didn't hit me fully until I stepped out of the motorcade. There, gleaming in the sunlight and surrounded by a sea of military personnel, was Air Force One, its very presence an exclamation mark in the story of my life. Crowds had gathered, kept at a distance by security barricades. News cameras panned across the tiny regional airport, greedy for any sign of chaos or spectacle. The area hummed with a tension more electrifying than any adrenaline rush I'd ever felt in the cockpit. Agent Monroe guided me to the plane. "The President wishes to speak with you, Captain Evans." Up the staircase, my legs felt heavier with each step. Inside, the plane looked more like something out of a presidential documentary than anything a commercial pilot like me ever saw. The wood-paneled walls, the hush of efficiency, the presence of a staff that moved with intention and purpose. Suddenly, I stood face to face with the President of the United States. He offered a hand and a kind, steady smile. "Captain Evans, thank you for coming." Somehow, I managed to stammer out, "It's an honor, sir," though my mind still tumbled, struggling to process how my entire world had pivoted in such a short time. He gestured for me to take a seat at a polished oval table. "You may not realize it, but the actions you took saved Admiral Dalton's life, and as you'll soon hear, may have spared our country from an international catastrophe." My heart beat so loud I could barely hear the words, but Agent Monroe took her position at the wall, and another man, older, pale but standing tall, entered from a connecting cabin. It took me a second to recognize him, but then I saw it. The man from 8B, a day's worth of hospital monitors still evident in the creases under his eyes. Admiral Dalton looked every inch the military legend as he extended his hand to me. "Captain Evans, you saved my life. I owe you more than I can ever repay." The truth continued to unfold in the President's calm, deliberate words. Dalton hadn't been traveling as himself for a reason. His identity had been fully concealed, known only to a handful at the very highest echelons of government. He was returning from a secret mission overseas, one where the fate of a fragile alliance, and it seemed the future of peace itself, hung by a thread. The wrong news, the wrong timing, and the world could have tilted into confrontation. I could feel my pulse pounding as the gravity of it all set in. "The choice you made," the President said, his voice gentle but resolute, "wasn't just about saving a single life. It allowed our efforts overseas, these delicate negotiations, to continue without chaos. If Admiral Dalton hadn't returned, those efforts would have collapsed. the world would be facing an entirely different crisis, one we may not have been able to contain. I understood then that my life had been changed, not just by punishment or headlines, but by the quiet, invisible lines that bind individual courage to national destiny. The President leaned forward. "I've spoken with FAA Administrator Grant. She's here to see you as well." The administrator entered the cabin, her expression measured and professional, holding a dossier bearing my name in all caps. She sat across from me and cleared her throat. "Captain Evans, we have reviewed the full incident, flight records, testimony, military communications. After consultation with national security and the recommendations of the President and Admiral Dalton, the FAA hereby reinstates your license with no mark against your record. In fact, it will reflect extraordinary judgment under emergency conditions." It was difficult to grasp. Just hours ago, I was facing the loss of my entire career. Now, with a single sentence, everything I'd known was rewritten. But the President wasn't finished, his gaze warm and direct. "Captain Evans, the Air Force is seeking leaders precisely like you, experienced, ethical, and able to choose wisely under unimaginable pressure. There's a position open in Special Command Transportation. Better pay, elite team, direct service to your country. Will you consider joining us?" Admiral Dalton, who had remained quiet the entire exchange, added his own encouragement. "You'd be doing what you do best, flying, but with purpose and trust at the highest level." Something in me thawed in that moment. The ache of the last 48 hours, the humiliation, the fear, the regret, receded, replaced by an overwhelming sense of possibility and gratitude. I don't know what to say," I admitted. The President smiled. "A simple yes will do." I looked around at those gathered, a room I never dreamed I'd enter, and found myself nodding, voice thick with emotion. Yes, I would be honored. There was more to learn. Details of Admiral Dalton's mission revealed just enough for me to understand the stakes. 20 months of diplomatic maneuvering, intelligence so sensitive it could tip the globe into conflict. My single decision, made in the chaos 3 miles above the Earth, had been the pivot point. Without Dalton's safe return, an alliance would have shattered and a belligerent nation emboldened, perhaps even war. My gamble had, by sheer circumstance, played a part in preserving peace. The President stood and shook my hand again. "Thank you, Captain Evans. The country needs people like you." On the ride back to the main terminal, my heart raced with gratitude and disbelief. The world outside hadn't changed, but the world inside me had. For the first time since making my choice, the future looked bright, full of new skies and untold horizons. But as we stepped out, a barrage of reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in my direction. The next chapter was about to begin. As I stepped down from Air Force One, I was met by a swarm of journalists pressing forward at the barricades. Boom microphones quivered in the air, reporters calling my name, desperate for the first word. Only 2 days earlier, they'd been parked outside my home, branding me either a villain or a reckless renegade. Today, the narrative was changing so fast, it made my head spin. A hastily arranged podium waited beside the runway, ringed by military personnel, TV crews, and, at the edge, my family. Claire, Emma, and Tyler stood in the shade of the crowd, faces a mix of hope and awe, red-rimmed eyes shining with relief. This time the world seemed on the brink of something positive, rather than the ruin I'd feared. A press liaison guided me to the microphone and stepped back, letting the silence grow expectant. Cameras zoomed in. I cleared my throat, fingers trembling against the metal. 2 days ago, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I chose to break a rule I'd followed my entire career. My conscience told me a life mattered more than regulations. At that moment I had no idea whose life I was saving. I only knew a man needed help, and fast. I found Claire's gaze near the press line, her tearful smile lifting me. Today, thanks to quick decisions, dedicated crew, and more luck than I can fathom, I found out that the man I helped was Admiral Dalton, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I learned that if he hadn't survived, we might all be facing a very different, darker future right now. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. I pressed on, remembering what the president had told me just moments before. I stand here now because I believe that sometimes doing what you know is right, even when it could cost you everything, brings about results you never expected. My license has been reinstated. I've been commended for my actions by the highest authorities, and today I'm honored beyond words to be offered a chance to serve my country in a new and vital role. A few reporters fired off questions from the front. "Captain, do you regret what you did? Would you make the same decision again?" I smiled, steady now that the story's weight had turned. My only regret is how many sleepless hours I spent worrying I might have ruined my family's future. Sometimes you have to risk everything for a stranger because it's the right thing, even if the cost isn't clear at the time. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Claire hugging Emma, tears streaking both of their faces. Tyler threw his arms into the air and let out a low whoop that made a few reporters laugh. After the conference, the three of them ran through crowd to meet me, enveloping me in an embrace I thought I might never feel again. For the world, it was the perfect photo. Our family reunited, joyful and weathered by the storm, but whole. My children whispered, "Dad, you're a hero," and Claire squeezed my hand so tight I almost winced. That night, as we sat around our dinner table for the first real meal together in days, it felt like returning from exile. The roast chicken and mashed potatoes tasted more like hope than food. For hours we talked, not just about job offers or news coverage, but about what had really been tested: love, faith, and courage. After dinner, as the sunset painted gold on the walls, my phone rang. The secure line displayed an unlisted number, one I somehow knew belonged to Admiral Dalton. I answered on speaker, and his strong, familiar voice filled the room. "Captain Evans, I wanted to thank you again, personally and from the bottom of my heart. You saved not just me, but so much more than you'll ever know. And I want everyone in your family to hear this. Your father's decision protected thousands, maybe millions. I intend to see his actions formally recognized." A hush settled over the table. Even Tyler was silent, the full reality of what we'd been through finally dawning. Dalton continued, "My diplomatic mission was the result of 2 years of negotiation. If I hadn't made it home, a conflict that could have swept across borders would have become inevitable. Your dad's courage changed history." When the call ended, Emma wrote a single sentence on a notepad, meant, I think, as much for herself as anyone. "Sometimes the bravest thing is to listen to your heart when no one else can see what you see." Those were the words that carried us through to the next sunrise, as word spread that the president himself had nominated me for the nation's highest civilian honor. For the first time in weeks, I believed that our toughest day had become the beginning of something incredible.